Hi, I'm Wes, the Explosion, and this is the Backlog. This week, I played Mario Tennis Aces for Switch. I picked this up a while ago when it was half off. I typically don't play sports games, so I only bought this because of the sale and it being a Mario game, and I think I should have went with my first instinct. I went into this thinking it'd be simple, running around and hitting one button to hit the ball back and forth. Instead, every button had functionality, some multiple with directional inputs, and you needed a lot of stage awareness to get the job done. There was also a lot of terminology that I, as a not sports fan, had heard of but had no idea what they actually meant, like lob and spike. This led to me having trouble even early on in story mode. In this video here, you can see me struggling against the just standard AI. I tried just hammering through the story mode, and I did get past the first boss. However, soon after that, I was challenged by a Koopa Troopa. I believe they said it was a 3-game set, so I figured that it was a best out of 3. After losing 1 and winning 2, it kept going. Soon, we reached a tiebreaker game, which I assumed meant that the next game would decide things. This game had a different scoring system, so I was already kinda confused, but I eventually won, only to have it start another match. At this point, I had much more than I could sit through, and I turned the game off, after playing for about an hour overall. I can't say whether this game is good or bad, just that it's not for me, and that I at least tried. I think I went into this expecting something more like Wii Sports and got something much more complex, and I did not have the patience to learn. Still, that's one off the list. Then I got around to Bloodstained, Curse of the Moon 2 by Inti Creates. I played the first one a few years back with a friend, passing the controller between game overs. We had a good bit of fun with it, along with the adjacent title Bloodstained Symphony of the Night, so I looked forward to this one. When I picked up the sequel here, I played the first 5 levels, then got frustrated and put it down. I pulled it up again this week, and after giving stage 6 a few tries, I got to the boss, only to die pretty easily while trying to figure out how to fight it. I checked out GameFAQs, and I learned 2 very important things. First, this game is supposed to be a good deal harder than the first. This explains why my friend and I were able to beat it in one setting without rage quitting. The second was that while there were some people slinging the get good rhetoric, more were giving out the advice to switch from veteran mode down to casual. A big part of me didn't want to do that due to personal gamer pride. The other part of me was really close to putting it down again, so I made a copy of my save file, in case I wanted to go back and play it from that point on veteran again, and continued on casual. I'm kinda glad I did, because while I think I could have done stage 6 on that setting, the following stage 7 would have been beyond me. At least not without practicing the stage for 10 hours on end, though stage 8 would have probably only taken me another 2. Between this and Cyber Shadow, my sense of difficulty is starting to be affected. These 2 games, pretty tough. Cuphead and Celeste, not too bad. What has gaming done? Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. In this game, you set out to scale a tower and kill a bunch of demons. It's styled after Castlevania, at least as far as I can tell since I haven't gotten around to playing them yet. As you travel through the stages, you gather a party of 4 characters, each with their own moves and varying health bars. You get Zangetsu, an imposing man with a katana and a whole lot of edge. Dominique, a member of the church with a spear and various magics. Robert, a man with a gun and a lot of movement options. And Hachi, a dog in a kettle-shaped, steam-powered mech with built-in bunker busters. You can switch between the 4 of them on the fly. When you die, you get sent back to a checkpoint, though your other party members do not regain any health when you do so. Oddly enough, there are some checkpoints for full party wipes, with extra ones in between for just single deaths. On Veteran, you only get so many lives, but on Casual, you have infinite, allowing you to make more use of the checkpoints. You also don't have knockback in Casual, which is huge. Back to the characters. Each one has their basic attack, but also a special that can be switched by picking up items and power-ups. This eats up some of your special points, which can be replenished by breaking lamps hanging throughout the stages. An odd point worth mentioning is that when you fight bosses and one of your party members fall, when you go back into the fight, the boss will retain some of the damage you previously dealt. Personally, I would have preferred that rather than resetting you to a checkpoint, you would have just swapped to the next person in line, but I respect the uniqueness of this setup. Another oddball part of it is that after you beat the game once, it wants you to do it several more times to continue the story. Overall, I did have fun, especially once I stopped trying so hard and dropped the difficulty, but it wasn't so fun that I wanted to play it over and over again consecutively. Sure, I'm sure there are some differences between runs, but it's still the same levels, so this is kind of a big ask. I'm satisfied with what I did for now. I might revisit it later and do episode 2, but I can't see myself ever doing back-to-back runs. Anyway, if this looks cool, I'd recommend playing the previous game first, due to it being easier, which makes it more accessible, and then, if that's your thing, go for 2. Oh, and while playing this back for editing, I just realized something I didn't talk about. I think the thing that screws with me most in this game is how when you jump, your trajectory is locked in. I'm used to games like Mario and Mega Man where if you jump and you're about to land on something bad, you can kinda shift mid-air and avoid it. Hopefully, at least if you're quick enough. Whereas with this, you kinda have to lock in the angle of your jump, whether it's an upward jump or a forward jump or whatever, at the beginning of the jump, and because of that, you can't make adjustments mid-air. It was a little different with Hachi with his hover ability, but everyone else, I kinda just had to get used to jumping and then planning my next move as soon as I landed and not panicking and actually jumping off the edge instead. But yeah, I don't know. This isn't the only game I've ever played that's like this, and I mean, I guess it makes more sense than the alternative. Sure, in real life you can adjust your weight slightly to, determine where you fall, but it's not like you can, change it all that drastically, right? But anyway, it was just an interesting point, so I figured I'd mention it here since that seemed to be one of my big problems with this game. Not a bad thing, just not what I'm used to. And also, I finished the book Mogworld by Benjamin Yancey Croshaw. This is the third book of his I've talked about, and I believe his first published novel. The book stars Jim, a mage in training who immediately dies. But before he can start enjoying the afterlife, a necromancer revives him as an undead to join his forces. He immediately tries to die again, but when he does, he winds up in a ghost-like version of the world, wanders around for a bit, and is then pulled back into his body. After making peace with this, he starts working his way up to management in the necromancer's employ, but soon that too is taken away. So he starts out on a journey to end his miserable existence once and for all. On his travels, he is joined by Meryl, a peppy undead who fixes up his body when it gets damaged, an undead priest who judges undead as unclean but somehow is exempt from that judgment himself, and Slippery John, a buffoonish rogue. The setting is very reminiscent of World of Warcraft, which is no coincidence, since it's cited as an inspiration. In addition to how death works, adventurers clamor for quests, spells have different levels, normal people revive at churches, and monsters respawn. This makes the book great for WoW enthusiasts and gamers in general, though the story is still fun enough that those unfamiliar can enjoy it. I myself only played WoW for about half a year and then never looked back, and I really enjoyed it. The humor is fun, the character's flawed but likable, some of the plights are relatable, Jim's sarcasm is on point, and I got really invested in seeing how things would turn out. As his first major title, though, it is still rough around the edges. For instance, Jim sometimes makes references to things that, given the setting, he should have no idea what they are. At first, I thought this was on purpose due to the true nature of the world, but it turned out later that no, this was indeed not the case. Of course, this is still a small gripe, and I'd still say it's worth a read. It's out of print, but you should still be able to find a digital copy. And finally, I got done After the Quake by Haruki Murakami. It's a collection of 6 short stories, a little over 20 pages each, with the common element being the 1995 earthquake in Kobe, Japan, an event I'm not very familiar with given how young I was at the time, but had a major impact in the country itself. Each of the stories references the earthquake in some way, shape, or form, some as background information, some having a direct connection to Kobe itself, some just having a psychological effect on the characters, but none of them take place in the actual affected area, oddly enough. The stories have a lot of metaphor and symbolism, so you have to read between the lines to get the full picture. I can say for sure that I understood some of them, thought I understood some but didn't, and had no clue on others, but I think this is fine. I think finding your own meaning and interpretation in reading is one of the big appeals of it as a hobby. It always kind of annoyed me in school when you were asked what the author meant by something and then got your answer marked wrong when it didn't match either the textbook's or the teacher's own personal interpretation and bias. Which is appropriate to bring up here because one of the stories says about this exact scenario, which endeared the character making the point to me. I talked about another book by Murakami previously, Kafka by the Shore, which I enjoyed enough to want to pick up more by this author, and I've noticed a few common themes. Besides all the allegory, the author references a lot of classic, foreign books and music, giving him and his characters the impression of being well read. Many of his stories also involve sexuality, but due to how well they're written, this feels more like an important element to the story rather than just pornography, with a certain level of class to it. Incest also gets brought up once, so I'm a little curious if this is a common theme, or if I just happened to read the two works that this happened to contain it. And if so, I'd want to know more about the author, since it's not really a subject that gets brought up willy-nilly in most cases. See The Glass Menagerie, for instance. Overall, I really enjoyed After the Quake. It was short, so it was easy for me to knock out in just a few days. The writing was engaging, and once I started a chapter, it was hard for me not to just read right through, even if I had other stuff I needed to get to and had just picked it up to take a quick break. And I'm still thinking about the stories I read and what some of the things might have meant in them. I have 3 more books of Murakami to read, and I'll probably pick up more once I'm through with those. It's no wonder that Murakami won fame for his writing even outside of his native Japan. I'd recommend both After the Quake and Kafka by the Shore. And that'll do it. It seems like I made more progress reading than gaming this week, even if I had 2 subjects for both. I've just been really enjoying the downtime I spend sitting down, listening to some music, and reading through text. Though this is supposed to be more of a video game focused series, so I'll try and spend a bit more screen time next week. Reading is good for the mind, so I'm not going to feel too bad about it. Anyway, thanks for watching, maybe subscribe if you enjoy this sort of thing, and perhaps I'll see you next week for another episode.